A Karen HOA president sold my inherited 40-acre ranch without my permission while I was driving cross-country to claim it. When I showed up with the deed, she called 911 claiming I was trespassing on her property. But what the cops found in her files will make your jaw drop. Watch till the end, because her meltdown in front of the sheriff is leg the will was ironclad, drafted by one of the best estate attorneys in the state. At the time, I was living in Seattle, working this corporate job that I absolutely hated, so the thought of inheriting this ranch felt like a sign from the universe. Time to start over. Time for something new. There was just one problem. I couldn't leave immediately. I'd have to give my job 2 months' notice, pack up my entire life, and arrange to have my stuff shipped. I called my grandfather's neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who'd been friends with Grandpa Tom for 30 years, and asked if she could keep an eye on the property until I got there. "Of course, dear," she said sweetly. "Tom would have wanted that. I'll make sure everything stays secure." What I didn't know was that in the 8 years since Grandpa Tom bought his ranch, a huge HOA community called Meadowbrook Estates had been built right next to his property. And the HOA president, who we'll call Karen, because of course that's her name, had been eyeing my grandfather's land for years. So let me tell you about Karen Mitchell, HOA president and self-appointed ruler of Meadowbrook Estates. This woman was leg he'd laugh and say, "Karen, I'd rather give this land to the coyotes than sell it to your HOA." After he passed away, Mrs. Peterson let me know that Karen showed up to the funeral, not to pay respects, but to ask about the property. At my grandfather's funeral, Mrs. Peterson said she overheard Karen telling someone, "Well, now that the old man is gone, maybe we can finally acquire that eyesore and develop it properly." I heard this and just about vomited, but I figured once I moved in and established residency, Karen would have to face facts and leave me alone. I was so wrong. Fast forward 2 months. I quit my job, packed everything I owned, said goodbye to Seattle, and started my cross-country drive to Texas. It was a 5-day journey, and I was excited. Every mile brought me closer to freedom, closer to keeping my grandfather's memory alive. On day 3 of my drive, somewhere in Montana, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Peterson, and she sounded frantic. "Jamie, you need to call me back immediately. Something terrible has happened with the property." My stomach dropped. I pulled over at the next rest stop and called her back with shaking hands. "Jamie, there are people at the ranch," she said breathlessly. "A moving truck, construction workers, everything. They're saying they own the property. They have paperwork. Karen is there, directing everything like she's in charge." "What? That's impossible. I have the deed. The property isn't in my name. How can someone else they're saying there was a sale? That you sold it to someone from the HOA community." "Jamie, I saw the documents. They have your signature on them." My blood ran cold. "Mrs. Peterson, I never sold anything. I'm literally driving there right now to move in. Someone forged my signature." "That's what I thought," she said. I tried to tell them, but Karen threatened to call the police on me for trespassing. What should we do? I instructed Mrs. Peterson to take photographs of everything and everyone, and to get copies of whatever documentation they were using if possible. Then I phoned my grandfather's estate attorney, Martin Shapiro, and explained the situation. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "This is fraud, plain and simple. Keep driving. I'm going to make some calls and meet you at the property when you arrive. Do not engage with these people until I'm there. Document everything." I drove the next 2 days in a state of rage and anxiety. How dare someone try to steal my grandfather's legacy? How is this even possible? Finally pulling up to the ranch, my heart shattered. There were construction vehicles everywhere. Someone had already torn down my grandfather's beautiful wooden fence and replaced it with a generic white vinyl one. There were workers installing landscaping that looked like every other cookie-cutter HOA property in America. And there, standing in the driveway like she owned the place, was Karen. She was exactly what you'd imagine. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer athleisure wear, oversized sunglasses, an expression of pure entitlement. She was barking orders at workers and checking her phone every few seconds. I parked my car at the entrance, blocking the driveway, and got out. My attorney, Martin, had texted that he was 15 minutes away and told me to wait for him. But I couldn't help myself. "Excuse me," I called out. "What exactly is going on here?" Karen turned to me with the fakest smile I've ever seen. Can I help you? This is private property. I know it's private property, I said, my voice shaking with anger. It's my private property. I'm Jamie Torres, Thomas Torres's granddaughter. I inherited this ranch. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes turned ice cold. I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. This property was sold 3 weeks ago to Mr. and Mrs. Chun, who are members of our HOA community. I'm overseeing the renovations to bring it up to community standards. Sold? I never sold this property. This is fraud. Karen whipped out her phone and started tapping into it. I have all the documentation right here. Sale agreement, signed by you, notarized, and everything. The Chins paid fair market value. If you have an issue, you'll need to take it up with your attorney, but right now, you're trespassing. I'm trespassing on my own property? Again, it's not your property anymore. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, or I'll call the authorities. That is when I saw Martin's car pull up. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, looking every bit the seasoned attorney he was. Don't call anyone just yet, Martin said smoothly. I'm Martin Shapiro, Ms. Torres's attorney. I'd love to see these documents you're referring to. Karen's confidence flickered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. Of course. I have everything properly filed. She gestured to a folder on a nearby table. Martin opened the folder and began examining the documents. I watched his face carefully. His expression darkened as he flipped through the pages. This is interesting, he said quietly. Ms. Mitchell, can you tell me when this alleged sale took place? 3 weeks ago, as I said. It's all right there in black and white. And where did this closing take place? At a title company in Dallas. Standard procedure. Martin looked up at her. That's fascinating because 3 weeks ago, my client was in Seattle, Washington, wrapping up her affairs before moving here. She has time-stamped photos, credit card receipts, and witnesses who can confirm she never left the state. She certainly didn't travel to Dallas for a closing. Karen's face tightened. Well, perhaps it was done remotely. People do virtual closings all the time. Not for a property of this value. Not without the actual property owner being present or at least verified through video conference, Martin said. But more importantly, I have the original deed right here, properly filed with the county, showing Ms. Torres as the sole owner. Your sale documents appear to be based on a forged signature. That's ridiculous. The Chins paid good money for this property. Then the Chins were victims of fraud, just like my client, Martin said calmly. And I'm very curious about how this alleged sale came about. Who represented Ms. Torres in this transaction? What title company processed it? And why wasn't the existing deed researched properly? Karen started backing away. I don't have to answer your questions. The Chins have ownership. If you have a problem, sue them. Oh, we will be pursuing legal action, Martin said. But right now, you and everyone here are trespassing on private property. I'm going to give you 30 minutes to clear out, or I'm calling the sheriff. You're calling the sheriff? Karen's voice went up an octave. I'm calling the police right now. You're trying to steal property from innocent buyers. And that's exactly what she did. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I couldn't believe what I was hearing as Karen spoke to the 911 dispatcher. Yes, I need police immediately at 4782 Ridgeview Road. There are trespassers on private property, and they're making threats. They're claiming they own the property, but they don't. This is very aggressive, and I'm afraid for my safety and the safety of the workers here. Martin just smiled and shook his head. He pulled out his phone and started taking photos of everything. The construction, the workers, Karen, all of it. Within 20 minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. Karen rushed over to them immediately, her voice dripping with false distress. Officers, thank goodness you're here. These people are trying to run us off the property. This woman, she pointed at me, is claiming she owns this ranch, but it was legally sold weeks ago. I have all the documentation. The first deputy, whose name tag read Morrison, looked tired. Ma'am, let's slow down. Can someone explain what's going on? Martin stepped forward professionally. Deputy Morrison, I'm Martin Shapiro, attorney for Ms. Jamie Torres. My client is the legal owner of this property, having inherited it from her grandfather, Thomas Torres. She has the deed filed with the county proving ownership. These people are trespassing and have engaged in what appears to be fraud by claiming to have purchased the property based on forged documents. Karen jumped in. That's a lie. The Chins bought this. Property fair and square. I have the sale agreement right here with her signature. She thrust the papers at the deputy. Deputy Morrison took the documents and examined them. His partner, Deputy Chun, no relation to the supposed buyers, pulled out a laptop from their patrol car and started typing. Ms. Torres, Morrison said to me, "Do you have your deed and identification?" I handed over everything. My driver's license, the original deed, the will, probate documents, everything Martin had told me to bring. Morrison studied them carefully, then looked at the alleged sale documents Karen had provided. He frowned. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "there's a problem here. According to county records, which I'm looking at right now, the property is still registered to Jamie Torres as of today. There's no record of any sale or transfer of ownership." Karen's face went white. That's impossible. The sale was processed. It was notarized. Do you have the name of the title company? Morrison asked. Karen fumbled with her papers. Lone Star Title Services. Deputy Chun looked up from his laptop. Morrison, Lone Star Title Services had their license revoked 6 months ago for fraudulent practices. They don't exist anymore. The color drained from Karen's face completely. I didn't know that, Karen stammered. The Chins hired them. I was just helping coordinate where Mr. and Mrs. Chun. Deputy Morrison asked. They're traveling. In Europe. They won't be back for another month. That's convenient, Martin said dryly. So they purchased the property, immediately left the country, and left you in charge of renovations? On property they've never even seen in person? Karen's story was falling apart faster than she could invent new lies. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to provide contact information for the Chins, as well as any and all documentation related to this alleged sale, Morrison said. In the meantime, Ms. Torres, you're the legal owner. According to county records, these people are trespassing. Officers, there must be some mistake. Karen's voice was getting shrill. I've been working with the HOA attorney on this. This property was supposed to be. She caught herself, realizing she'd said too much. Supposed to be what? Martin asked quietly. Absorbed into the HOA? Purchased by the HOA? Is that what this is about? Karen's silence was deafening. Deputy Chin spoke up. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you have permission from Ms. Torres to enter this property, make modifications, or arrange any kind of sale? I had permission from the owners. The legal owner is standing right here. Morrison interrupted. And she's saying she never gave permission. So I'll ask again. Did Ms. Torres give you permission? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The Chins, they had the documents. I thought everything was legal. Did you verify the sale with the county? Morrison pressed. The Chins said they had. Did you verify it? Silence. Morrison turned to the construction workers and landscapers who'd been watching this entire exchange with growing alarm. Gentlemen, I'm sorry to inform you, but you're working on property without the owner's authorization. I recommend you pack up and leave immediately. Whatever agreement you had is invalid. The workers didn't need to be told twice. They started loading equipment within minutes. Martin leaned toward me and whispered, "This is going better than I even hoped. Just stay calm and let the deputies handle it." Karen was spiraling. You can't do this. The HOA has an interest in this property. It affects our community property values. That old man let this place become an eyesore, and now his granddaughter is going to okay. That's enough, Morrison said firmly. Ma'am, you need to leave this property now. If you refuse, I'll cite you for trespassing. Trespassing? I'm trying to improve this community. You're trespassing on private property, Morrison repeated. And if there are forged documents involved, that's fraud. I strongly suggest you contact an attorney. That's when Karen completely lost it. This is ridiculous, she screamed. I've been HOA president for 8 years. I've worked tirelessly to maintain property values. That old man ruined the aesthetics of this entire area with his junk ranch. And now you're telling me his trashy granddaughter gets to waltz in here and do whatever she wants? My hands clenched into fists. Martin put a hand on my arm, warning me to stay quiet. Ma'am, you need to calm down, Deputy Chin said. Calm down? Do you have any idea what that property does to our home values? Every potential buyer sees that disaster and asks questions. The HOA should have the right to acquire properties that affect our community. The HOA has no authority over property that isn't part of the HOA, Martin said. You know this. In fact, I'm willing to bet you've always known this, which is why you resorted to fraud. I didn't forge anything, Karen shrieked. The Chins handled everything. Then produce the Chins, Martin said calmly. Give us their contact information so we can verify this story. Karen's face went through about 10 different expressions in 5 seconds. Finally, she burst into tears, the kind of manipulative crying that people do when they realize they're caught. This isn't fair, she sobbed. I worked so hard for this community. We had plans for that property. We were going to build a community park, increase property values for everyone. It was supposed to benefit the community. Using someone else's property without their permission, Morrison said. That's called theft, ma'am. Karen pointed a shaking finger at me. SHE doesn't even live here. She's from Seattle. She probably doesn't even want the property. I was doing everyone a favor. A favor. I finally spoke, my voice cold. You tried to steal my grandfather's legacy. The home he built with his own hands. The land he loved. And you think you were doing a favor? Your grandfather was a stubborn old fool who didn't understand progress. That was it. I stepped forward, and Martin had to actually hold me back. That stubborn old fool was worth 100 of you, I said through gritted teeth. He built something real while you sit around measuring your neighbor's grass and terrorizing families over mailbox colors. You're nothing but a petty tyrant with too much time and too little purpose. Karen's face turned purple. All right, that's enough, Morrison said. Ms. Mitchell, you need to leave now. I'm not asking again. Karen gathered her things with jerky, angry movements, still crying and muttering about how unfair everything was. The workers finished packing and left quickly, clearly wanting nothing to do with the legal nightmare they'd stumbled into. Before Karen got in her car, Deputy Morrison stopped her. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to need that contact information for the Chins before you leave. Karen handed over a business card with shaking hands. Morrison took a photo of it with his phone. We'll be in touch, he said. And I recommend you contact a lawyer immediately. If those documents were forged, you could be facing serious charges, whether you did the forging yourself or conspired with others to commit fraud. Karen's last look at me was pure hatred before she drove away. After she left, Morrison turned to me and Martin. Ms. Torres, I'm sorry you had to deal with this. It's clearly fraud, and we'll be opening an investigation. I recommend you document all the changes they made to your property and file a police report. You'll probably need that for insurance or legal purposes. Thank you, Deputy, I said. I couldn't believe this actually happened. HOA disputes get crazy sometimes, Morrison said with a tired smile. But I've never seen someone try to forge a sale before. That's a new one. Most HOA presidents just make your life miserable with fines and letters. After the deputies departed, Martin and I took a walk around the property documenting everything. They'd taken down about 200 feet of original fencing, ripped out some of my grandfather's landscaping, and started grading a section of land near the road. How much is this going to cost to fix? I asked him, feeling overwhelmed. Don't worry about that right now, Martin said. We're going to sue everyone involved, Karen, the Chins if they exist, and the HOA itself if they were involved. You'll be compensated for damages, legal fees, everything. But first, let's get that police report filed and start the legal process. Over the next few days, it all unfolded like a crime thriller. Turns out Mr. and Mrs. Chun didn't actually exist. The names on the sale documents were completely fabricated. The phone number Karen provided was an offline Google Voice line. The email address bounced as non-existent. And when investigators dug deeper, they found something even more damning. Karen had created the entire scheme herself. She'd forged my signature using samples from my grandfather's estate documents that were publicly available through probate records. She'd created fake buyer identities, using the defunct title company's name, knowing it couldn't be verified, and had planned to purchase the property through the HOA using funds she'd embezzled from HOA dues over the years. Her plan was to make it look like a legitimate sale to outside buyers, then have those buyers donate the property to the HOA for a tax write-off, which of course would never happen because they didn't exist. By the time anyone figured it out, she assumed I'd be too overwhelmed by the legal complexity to fight it, and she'd already have the property under HOA control. It was an elaborate, illegal, completely insane. The HOA board, when they found out, immediately removed Karen as president and issued a public apology to me. Turns out most of the board members had no idea what Karen was up to. They'd all trusted her implicitly and were horrified to find out she'd been embezzling funds and committing fraud. Karen was arrested 2 weeks after the confrontation on charges of fraud, forgery, identity theft, embezzlement, and criminal trespass. Her mugshot hit the local news, and the story went viral in HOA horror story communities online. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA dissolved entirely 6 months later after multiple homeowners sued over Karen's mismanagement and embezzlement. Property values actually went up once the HOA restrictions were lifted and people could make their homes their own again. With Martin's help, I sued Karen, the HOA, and the construction company that had worked without verifying ownership. A substantial settlement was awarded to me enough to restore my grandfather's property to its original beauty and then some. I spent 6 months personally rebuilding everything Karen had destroyed. I found photos of Grandpa Tom's original fence and recreated it exactly. I replanted native wildflowers and trees he'd cultivated. I restored the house, keeping all his personal touches and adding a few of my own. Mrs. Peterson came over almost every day, sharing stories about my grandfather and helping me understand his vision for the property. She became like a grandmother to me, and we formed a bond I'll treasure forever. I also installed security cameras around the entire perimeter after Martin recommended them. Better safe than sorry, he said. You've made an enemy, and some people don't let things go. He was right. 4 months after Karen's arrest, I get anonymous letters in my mailbox nasty, threatening letters about how I'd destroyed a community, how I was a terrible person, how I'd ruined property values. I turned them all over to the police, who documented them as potential harassment and threats. Karen eventually pleaded guilty to all charges. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution not just to me, but to all of the HOA members she'd embezzled from. Her lawyer tried to argue for leniency, saying she'd been under stress and had a passion for community improvement that went too far. The judge wasn't having it. Ms. Mitchell, you didn't just cross a line, he said during sentencing. You committed deliberate, calculated fraud over an extended period. You stole from your neighbors, you attempted to steal inherited property, and you forged documents. This wasn't passion gone wrong. This was criminal behavior, plain and simple. I attended the sentencing. I wanted to look her in the eye one last time. She never looked back at me. She kept her head down the entire time, probably knowing that facing me would mean facing what she'd really done. It's been 2 years since I moved to the ranch, and I can honestly say it was the best decision I've ever made. I work remotely as a freelance consultant now, which gives me the freedom to maintain the property and actually enjoy my life. I've turned part of Grandpa Tom's land into a small organic farm. I sell vegetables and herbs at the local farmers market, and I've become part of the community in a way that Karen never could have understood. I'm not trying to control anyone or force them to live by my rules. I'm just being a good neighbor and contributing positively. The former HOA residents often stop by to chat or buy produce. Many of them have thanked me for standing up to Karen, saying she'd made their lives miserable for years. One woman told me she'd been fined $500 for having a wreath on her door that was non-compliant with community standards. Another family said they'd almost sold their home because Karen had threatened to sue them over their children's swing set. You freed us, one neighbor said. We didn't realize how trapped we felt until the HOA dissolved. I've also turned part of the property into a memorial for my grandfather. There's a beautiful stone bench overlooking the creek with a plaque that reads, Thomas Torres, a man who built his own freedom and never apologized for it. I sit there at times, usually in the early morning with my coffee, and I think about what Grandpa Tom would say about everything that happened. I think he'd be proud, not because I won some legal battle, but because I fought for what mattered: family, legacy, and the right to live freely on your own land. Mrs. Peterson told me something once that stuck with me. She said, "Your grandfather always knew someone would try to take this place eventually. That's why he made sure his will was ironclad. He wanted you to have something worth fighting for, and he knew you'd be strong enough to protect it." She was right. This ranch isn't just land. It's a symbol of independence, of resisting people who think they have the right to control others. It's proof that sometimes the little guy really can win against entitled tyrants. About 6 months ago, I got a letter. It was postmarked from the state prison where Karen is serving her sentence. I debated opening it. Part of me wanted to just throw it away and never think about her again. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was strange. It wasn't quite an apology, but it wasn't as hostile as I'd expected. It was more like a rambling justification for everything she'd done, mixed with some genuine-sounding regret. She wrote about how she'd dedicated her life to making Meadowbrook Estates the perfect community, and how my grandfather's ranch had been the one blemish she couldn't fix. She claimed she'd never intended for things to go as far as they did, that it had spiraled out of control. But then, in the last paragraph, she wrote something that actually sounded human. "I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't blame you. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I realize I became the very thing I always hated: someone who put rules and appearances above people. Your grandfather probably knew that about me all along. That's why he never gave in. He saw through me. I wish I'd been more like him and less like whatever I became. I hope you're taking care of the ranch. Despite everything, it really is beautiful." I read that letter 3 times. I never responded. I didn't owe her that. But I kept it filed away in a folder labeled "The Karen Incident" because it felt like the real ending to the story. She'd finally admitted, even if only to herself, that she'd been wrong, that my grandfather had been right all along, and that sometimes freedom and authenticity are worth more than perfect appearances. So that's my story. I inherited a ranch outside the HOA, and a Karen tried to steal it before I could even move in. She failed, got arrested. I got my grandfather's legacy back. But more than that, I learned something important. There will always be people who think they have the right to control you, to dictate how you should live, to take what's yours because they think they deserve it more. And when you encounter those people, you can't back down. You have to fight, even when it's hard, even when it seems impossible. My grandfather knew that. That's why he built this ranch in the first place. That's why he never sold to Karen or anyone else. He understood that true freedom means standing your ground when someone tries to take it from you. I'm standing on that ground now, and I'm never leaving. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe to Neighbor Wars HQ for more insane neighbor and HOA stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below telling me about your crazy neighbor or HOA experience. I read every single one, and your story might be featured in a future video. Also, if you want to support the channel, check out the link in the description for exclusive behind-the-scenes content and extended interviews. Remember, don't let the Karens win. Stand your ground, know your rights, and never apologize for protecting what's yours. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Neighbor Wars HQ, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors, especially when they're your fences on your property.